Afternoon, John.
Afternoon.
It's another Friday afternoon, so it's another Intentional Living podcast. You know, this is our 10th podcast. Does it seem
That's amazing. That is
yesterday,
amazing.
huh?
Yeah.
And you know what's as we were discussing before we started, the power of the accountability practice is such that we can always review the basics. And as you know, I help facilitate an accountability group, and we do have new people that come in from time to time, and it's always valuable, even for those of us who have been working on this for a long time. I recognize that I've been exposed to this for 9 years. It's when I first met you. So there's still stuff to learn. And part of it is, I think, is because the human being has got access to infinite possibility. And so these principles are just being applied to all the new stuff we continue to learn about ourselves and our world. And so the foundational question always is, what does accountability do to help me make my life better? And maybe you'd be willing to start there with that.
Again, when we say accountability, and I don't know who's going to watch this, but the word accountability, if you look it up in the dictionary, it means that somebody is to blame, somebody is held accountable. I think the word in the dictionary I was looking at was blameworthy. And the context with which intentional living uses accountability is just accounting for where you find yourself, the end result of your total accumulated experience. What is the behavior that has resulted from that? No blame, no judgment. So if you break the word apart, accountability, so the ability to state the data of where you find yourself in a, I don't want to say no feeling way, no blame or judgment. The feeling is what's important. When I own where I'm at, like the first time I heard myself say, "Hi, my name's John, I'm an alcoholic," there was an internal thing that happened that I wasn't really fully aware of. And from that moment, then I found myself coming back to a meeting. I found myself feeling different, feeling relieved that it was finally out. There's a story I tell. There was a guy that got arrested for some major fraud, accounting, embezzlement thing. And this guy had been doing it for years, and he got caught and he got sentenced to a term in jail. And he was being interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, how do you feel about what happened to you? And he said, "I feel relieved. I feel free. It's like it's off my back." There was this thing about telling the truth and being accountable for the behavior that gave him an internal freedom that was relieving. And that story has always stuck with me. And in the development of this process, that's part of what was in my mind when we were creating it. The other thing is I was working with inmates, and I was working alongside another group called Violence Intervention Program, and their key component was accountability. Stating stating the violence you did, just saying it what you did, emotional violence in the form of dismissing or ignoring or redefining. And you were in a room full of people who were like-minded, and there was no blame or judgment. So you could say things that you couldn't say in normal conversation, that people would like take a step back or say, "Oh no, that's not really you," or "How could you do that?" And that accountability, that process in that violence intervention group gave them some freedom. And I was doing my group, and I started talking about accountability because I knew they were hearing it in the violence intervention group. And for some reason, they weren't getting it in the other group, because as soon as I said accountable, they all kind of like took a breath and said, hell no. And their idea of accountability was the gavel hits the table, they got 5 years. So that's accountable. They don't want to do that. They were already accountable. So that's where I got no blame, no judgment. We're just going to state the end results of your behavior. And then I've been working on that concept ever since, how to be accountable for my behavior without the shame and blame that goes with it. Now, when I am accountable, there's a feeling. The feeling is hurt or devastated, or there's an emotional, visceral frequency that happens, and that's the opening. And in that emotional state from the truth, I could say what I wanted, and I found that it was, let me give you an example. In a workshop I was in, I heard myself say, I'm a bad dad. And that really hit me, because I believed I was a nice guy, I'm a good dad. And when I heard myself say that, all the times I had used either ridicule or threat with my children came up, and I saw the destruction of it. And at the same time, I could say what I wanted that's different. So the accountability, this is where I'm at. I got a good grasp on where I'm at, which is mean to my children. It is my intent to be a loving, caring, nurturing father. And that is said with some emotion behind it that goes back into that reticular activating system. Now might come from. It is shifted. It's like that's the alchemy moment. So,
well, let me see if I can drill down a little bit, because let me just share my experience, and then I'd like you to comment on it, which is that where I found this process or this practice to be the most valuable, at least starting out, is when something is upsetting me and I can't explain it.
yes.
So maybe you said something, or my partner said something, or my boss said something, and I just have what I could judge to be an irrational response. And it's usually in the form of a criticism of the source. You idiot, or you don't know what you're talking about, or how could you say that to me, or some form of you
Right.
victimizing me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I first started doing this work with you, and in group, of course, what I saw was that I had a whole variety of these kinds of responses in a whole variety of different situations, or at least at the time they all looked different. Over time, I've come to understand more or less the common source of all of it. But I think it's important for those who are listening to this for the first time to really grasp that this is a process that helps us deal with compulsions, inner demons, critical voices in our heads, because it's, in other places you call this demystifying behavior. So how can I face the source of all of this negative emotion, judgment, almost sometimes feels like self-imprisonment, self-violence. First of all, I got to be able to recognize it. So for me, what accountability meant is I was just thinking of it more in the terms of accounting, the mathematical or the profession of accounting. I'm just creating an account of what's going on. And number one, and number two, I'm seeking to account for the actual experience that I'm having, not the story I'm telling myself about it. Because as long as I stay in the story, I'm staying in victim. And as long as I'm the victim, I can never change anything in my life. Does that make sense as a value of this practice?
That was well put. And this concept is so far out of the paradigm or the language that we use or the way we interact or what we believe to be true, and it's counterintuitive that you saying how you see it, me saying how I see it. And the next time we talk about it, I may approach it in a different way to get the idea that this is about me finding my authentic self. What's blocking me from finding my authentic self? And what I know is that it's trauma. How do we get to the trauma? This process works. It brings relief to a stuck emotion or trauma. And it's like the body knows how to do this. The body knows what's going on. How, if I get to the truth, and where I got that from, the statement, the Bible statement, the truth will set you free. I've been looking for that for a long time. And when I stumbled upon this truth, and in the accountability tree, when I write it on the board, it's my truth. I'm resentful. I'm full of contempt. There's an internal process that the body knows how to do when it hears the truth that opens me up to something different. I can't let go of what I'm not fully aware of. And if I continue to defend my actions with my children in the form of discipline, in the form of what's best for them because it's a tough world, and I actually traumatize them, why would I stop? There's no reason for me to stop other than realizing the pain I'd caused them. Because when I said I'm a bad dad, I'm a mean father, that hurt. I could feel what hurt felt like, and the motivation behind my saying it is my intent to be a loving, caring, nurturing father was substantial. It was deep. It was full of emotion, and emotion is the creative, connecting force that gives us everything we have as human beings. And this is a good segue into the 4 constants of relationship. How we operate as relationships. What are the guideposts? How do I find this? What am I looking for? All that.
Before we go there, if you're open to it, the thing that I would jumped into my mind as you were just talking about emotion was, what is it about human beings that we so easily block our feelings and sensations and emotions off? I mean, I think part of if I were listening to this for the first time, I could relate to when I first started doing this work, that I thought I was completely and perfectly in touch with my emotions. And the fact that I wasn't was only because I have this capacity to create denial, and I can block myself off from this incredible production that my body and my nervous system are always producing. So there's something about us as human beings that permits us to be in denial. And we often are happier there than we are in being fully in touch with this whole range of emotions that we otherwise are producing. What's going on?
I went 3 different places. One of the places I went, as you were talking, is that we are human beings, planet Earth, carbon-based life forms, biochemical, electromagnetic beings, motivated and operating through emotional impulse. It's not something that's separate from us or happens to us. It is the description of our humanity. We were built that way so that we can navigate consciousness, relationships, beyond the survival of food, shelter, clothing. So number one, we are emotional beings. When we say human being, it's mind, body, spirit. It's the whole package. We have been conditioned through the society that we live in that emotions are something we need to control. They get out of hand. Women are emotional. Even there's a certain time of the month where women get highly emotional, and it's seen as something that is not wanted or something to control. And the truth is, as an emotional being, I'm motivated and operated through emotions. Here's what I'm trying to say. The language we use has equated the end result, the behavior, with the emotion. So if I say I'm angry, that's usually describing somebody who is violent. Instead of saying that person is violent, we say he is angry. So we use emotion to describe the behavior when the behavior is post-emotion. The other thing, we're talking about the reticular activating system and the fight-flight freeze mechanism. We have created, I as a man have created an identity that has a standard of how I need to be treated, or what my image is and how to uphold that image, and not be seen as weak or emotional or stupid. And that identity, when that identity is challenged, like, John, that was a stupid move, I go into this defensive mode, which my reticular activating system survival mechanism has just pumped adrenaline into my body. And adrenaline mimics emotions. My hands get sweaty, my heart beats faster, I feel stuff in my body, I feel tension. And it's an adrenaline rush, and it mimics emotions, and we call that adrenaline rush. We use words that are to describe emotions, and it gets really convoluted. And adrenaline's purpose is to get us out of our emotional body, out of our thinking head, into the reaction mode. Now, for me, in my pre-recovery and pre-understanding of what I'm talking about, if the toast was burnt at breakfast, it's like, what's going on? What's going on? I don't like, why'd you burn my toast? I took it personal. And this reticular activating system saw that as devaluing me as a man. And I was in an adrenaline rush, and I was acting as if the sky had fallen. Now I know if the toast is burnt, I simply ask, is there something wrong with the toaster? Are you having a good day, bad day? Would you like to go out to breakfast? I'm in this responsive mode where my image isn't being challenged. I'm not in a defensive place, and I'm present with that person. And
so are you saying that in the previous scenario, that adrenaline actually is a mask of the true emotional state? It's a decoy.
no, I'm actually saying that when my image is challenged, my reticular activating sees that as a life-threatening situation. So it pumps adrenaline into my body, right, so I can resubstantiate my image, like, don't do that to me. And we call it taking it personal, being defensive. In that defensive mode, my body has got adrenaline going through it. We no longer have saber-toothed tigers. There are things that are life-threatening, and that's what adrenaline's for. It's a good thing to have this ability to have adrenaline. But when we see our life, I connected my value to my behavior, and then I created an image and a standard of how I should be treated based on my behavior. And somebody didn't give me the services or denied me that image. My body read it as a physical threat. If I'm devalued as a man, that means my value goes down. My body's reading that as a threat to my existence, pumps adrenaline, and I'm in this fight, flight, freeze mode. And either the toast is burnt or the kids are crying or something that I now just simply respond to because I'm part of what's going on. I went from the image places, I'm the man of the house. That's the idea I had. I'm the man of the house. There's a certain privileges due me because I'm the man of the house. I produce the money. So I went from that belief, that concept, that image from man of the house to the man in the house as a participant, as a helpmate, as a support for my my partner, instead of this is what you owe me because of my position. And there's a lot to unwrap in this.
Right.
And
so let me pick on one.
Okay.
If I might, because I appreciate your answer to my question. So that again, for the newcomer, the thing that is valuable to learn about myself is that my defense mechanisms, which were generated when I was a pre-verbal infant, because of whatever trauma I was experiencing, and infants can experience trauma even if there's no intention to inflict trauma on the part of the parents or the caregivers, that in a certain way, I got frozen into that whatever particular defense mechanism I generated because I had to survive. And I'm not even aware that I have to survive. I just do it.
Yeah.
So it's automatic, and over time, it works. Somehow.
The clinical expression for that is post-traumatic stress.
Right. And so somehow I've generated this particular, my own version of this defense mechanism, and now it's going to operate in me until I have awareness that that's what's going on.
Yes.
And that's why when I started out this conversation, I said, part of the value of this practice is to help me deal with compulsions and other subconscious energies that seem disproportionate to what's going on in front of me. I mean, just the toast was burned, for crying out loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's that mechanism. I think you said it on one of the earlier podcasts, that mechanism is actually doing its job, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's behaving perfectly.
It's working fine. It's simply been misinformed. It's running off old information, misinformed information, information that in the form of trauma or anger, unreleased anger, resentment about how I was treated. As a 3-year-old, if I'd have known what I know now, I'd have taken my diapered ass up to my dad and I pointed my finger right in his face and I said, "You need help. I'm not putting up with this because you're mean. And I'm going down the street and I'm living with Timmy because his dad treats him nice. And you get your shit together, I'll be back." But I didn't have that. I didn't have that wherewithal as a 3-year-old to say, this hurts. This is frightening. I'm afraid. And whatever you're doing, please stop. And now we're stuck. I'm stuck as an adult, and somebody does some innocuous thing, and I'm stomping my feet, slamming the door, running upstairs. and I'm wondering at myself, why am I doing this? One of the questions that I use in my workshop, and I've said it in the podcast here, there's 3 questions. Have you ever hurt somebody you loved, regretted it, and then did it again, usually in the same way? Or another one, I'll give one more. Have you ever been in a situation and you knew without a doubt that you would regret that decision, and a little voice in your head even, stop, what are you doing? Don't do that. And you found that you couldn't or wouldn't stop that behavior? We're talking about the mechanism that drives that behavior over and over and over again, that makes no sense to you whatsoever, but is driven by this acute, accumulated experience that is traumatized, full of trauma, and unresolved emotions that are stuck in the body all over the place. It's like, so yeah, I'll stop there.
So before we get to the 4 constants, I want to complete the tree.
Yes.
Because it's necessary but not sufficient for me to discover and account for the truth of what's going on with me. Because the object is to create something consciously. And that's why what I learned from this process is, once I feel the emotional impact of stating the truth of what's going on, I'm a bad dad, or as I've shared, I love being in debt.
Yeah.
Now, whatever that feeling is actually an incredible energetic ground into which I can plant a different desire.
Yes.
And now, to complete the process, the accountability process, is to identify that new desire and to reframe it by stating it as an intention.
Yes. Yes.
And I tell you, John, I did this work for years and years and years before I really got how critical the last part is. And I would get proud of myself. I could identify the truth, but I wouldn't necessarily ask myself what I wanted instead.
Right.
And then, of course, without doing that, the old behaviors will continue to reassert themselves in similar kinds of situations. Correct. And then I would use that as an opportunity to beat myself up. It's like, I'm not learning this practice well enough. What's wrong with me? Blah, blah, blah. And so I think it's really critical, as we share this information with people, to take them to the end point, which is the generation of this new life that I choose to live consciously.
Right. Can you give me power to share screen?
Yeah.
While we're talking? Okay. Because I want to bring that up, and I got access to it real quick here, and then go through it. And I think this podcast is going to be about accountability. It's not going to be about what we discussed it was going to be about. And I love this, because I love this fluidity, the way it's working.
All right, well, keep talking, because I'm trying to figure out how I do this.
Okay.
I thought I knew. Go ahead. Oh, here it is.
And
okay, you got it.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to pull up on the screen the actual accountability, what we're referring to as the accountability tree, and then go through it so people can see what we're talking about, have a frame of reference. This is exciting. This is a handout that I did for Okay.
So you might want to just have it fill out the screen.
Okay.
There you
go. Okay. Yeah, that works really good. So we're talking about accountability. So we call it the accountability tree. And no blame, no judgment. And the truth we were talking about is simply stating where you find yourself in the situation where you own character defect, like I'm arrogant. And whatever resonates with you, whatever, like, I really don't want to say that. I don't want to admit I'm arrogant. And the resistance to admitting the arrogance speaks to the depth of arrogance that I found myself in. So let's use that as an example. I'm arrogant. So I would say that, and I'd be in a place where no blame or judgment, and I'd simply take a breath. And that next step, emotion, happens. Our bodies have not forgotten how to be emotional. That we are emotional beings 24/7 from the time of, I'm going to say, conception to this moment. So our body puts, the truth puts us in an emotional frequency of realization or truth. And I simply take a breath. And this emotional body of ours has the ability to process 4 million bits of information per second. And so the truth initiates the emotion. And when I said I'm arrogant, I just came to me all the different times that I was arrogant. Some of it was detailed, others kind of nondescript, just a feeling. And then after I have that awareness, the next step is I intend. So based on this truth, this is where I find myself, I'm arrogant. What do I want to manifest? What do I want instead of arrogance? And I come up with, it is my intent to be kind. It is my intent to love myself. It is my intent. And the really cool, interesting thing about this is every individual comes up with their own. What do you want? Well, I want to be free of this. Okay, it is my intent to be free. And that fuses with the emotional frequency when I told the truth, and simply sets back down into my subconscious pool of information, reframed. And then that becomes my come from. That becomes the subconscious pool of information motivating my decisions. The next step is self-validation. When I get to a truth that I've been denying or not wanting to admit to, arrogance, entitlement, mean, controlling, or needy, that validates that pool of information. That pool of information has been trying to keep me safe from my childhood, from the time of the trauma till now, by saying, when you hear this, or this happens, or this, you feel this, this is the response you're going to do. That's where I heard somebody I love regret it, and then do it again, or know that what I'm about to do I would regret, and find that I have no power to stop. I find myself doing it, compulsive behavior. That validation of that mechanism, it's like saying, good job. And then it hears, it is my intent to be kind. And it's subjective. It just simply says yes. And fuses with the pool of information. Now it's simply different. And then the next step is intentional living. And that's where I got the lines coming back up to the top. And it's coming from your heart. So I'm going to stop there.
Right. And we say that line coming back to the top is also, and repeat.
And repeat. And do it again. And do it again.
One of the things that's a constant among particularly beginners is the disappointment that this doesn't automatically make everything different 100%.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've become aware of, and I've started to use this, John, is to say the accountability practice is for the present moment. This is for right now. And yes, there is now a shift in my subconscious database, but that shift may not be sufficient to heal the trauma yet. So I'm going to do it again the next time it comes up. And it's all about being present. So the truth is only available in the present moment. And
Yes.
if I've been denying it, it's because I've been unwilling to be present to the truth, which has its own presence, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And so that The emotion is always only present. There's no such thing as feeling an emotion in the past or the future. It can only be felt right now in the body.
Yes.
And therefore, when I set my new intention, I'm doing it right now. And I let go of any expectations of what it's going to yield in the future, because I'm not in charge of that any more than I'm in charge of figuring out how my new intention is going to manifest. So there's something alchemical around human creativity that we really haven't mentioned, but that leads to the conversation, I think, about the four constants. So I'm going to just introduce that briefly. In John's work, when we look at the accountability tree, we also often have the barriers. What are the barriers to getting to the truth? And we also have the four constants of what happens to help me stay in the truth. And the four constants are, how do I focus my attention right here, right now? Noticing and withdrawing my projections, move to my pain, and state my intentions.
Yes.
So maybe you could take a little bit of time and tell us how these four constants now will support me and my self-validation and intentional living.
Okay. Let me pull up a diagram of these. This is working really well.
Okay.
This is the workbook that people can get. Here they are, the four constants of relationship. Focus attention on my projections, move towards my pain, and today I intend to.
Are you going to share that, or is that just something that you're looking at?
That's something I wanted to share it so that they could see what it looked like. I, for some reason, have lost your picture and my picture. I'm going to try this.
Okay.
Anyway, let me go through them real
Please.
quick, and then. So I call them the four constants of relationship, because what I've come to understand is everything we do is in relationship to people, places, or things. I would not have a sense of self if there were not somebody else to relate to. So I call them the four constants of relationship. Everything we do is in relationship to. So what's important to me which is 24/7, my focus and what I'm paying attention to. If I don't know what my focus is, then the subconscious pool of information has a focus and is traumatized. And that's where I find myself doing the things I don't understand why I'm doing. So when I make the focus conscious, or I create an intent, or I tell the truth in the accountability tree, that's bringing it, like you said, to the present moment. My focus is, oh my God, I'm arrogant. Now I can feel that, I can see that. That's where my attention is. The on my projections is if I'm ever at a loss for what's going on, or I find myself in a reactive, defensive mode, whatever I'm seeing in that other person is always true about me. It may or may not be true about the other person until you ask them. Anything I perceive of you, Marty, is true about me. And if I understand that, if I know that what I'm projecting out is actually something inside of me, especially if I have issue with it, especially if I find myself in the defense mode or the reactive mode. And if I take that projection, like that person's rude, and I go, I am rude. I have what I need for the accountability process. I have my truth. If I look at somebody and I see that they're rude, and I simply move to resolution, then I've already dealt with that. That's whatever is happening is not a trigger or bringing up an old situation. So any projection I have that is intense, that speaks directly to where my wounding is, like rude. Okay, so I say I'm rude, take it to the accountability tree. I'm rude, take a breath. Oh, it is my intent to be kind. Now, this third one, move towards your pain. We live in a society that doesn't like pain. We got a pill for every pain you got. If you got a pain, if you got a headache, take an aspirin. And the pain I'm talking about in these four constants is not the pain that the dysfunction has created. It's the original pain. So if I'm willing to be uncomfortable or feel awkward or feel embarrassed, there's something in that pain for me, for my awareness. And I'll leave that at that. And then today I intend to, if I'm not consciously intending to do something, the reticular activating system has a definite intent. It has a specific intent. For example, if I have a avoidant attachment disorder, when a person gets close to me, even though I want that person close to me, that's when the old trauma is triggered and I move away. So if I'm not aware that I have this avoidance of intimacy, I lost my train of thought. But when I'm not aware that I have this intimacy, or I am aware that I have this intimacy issue, I can intend to do something different. I don't know if that's real clear. That's basically, I could talk for another hour on these four things. So I'm going to take this off. I don't know how to do that. Let me see.
I'm hoping that we'll get into that more next time.
Yeah.
But again, I appreciate that we end up always at intend. Today
Yes.
I intend.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, the purpose of this practice is to free me to know who I am authentically and to be free to make choices that feed my deepest soul, my deepest desires, so that my stance is moving from victim to creator.
Yeah, it like, you know, you hear these axioms, you know, be in the flow, don't row upstream, just be in the flow, just be in the flow. Well, we were born in the flow. Then we got conditioned to think that rowing upstream is a pretty good idea. So we're all rolling upstream and colluding with each other about how this sucks, and then making excuses about why we just won't let go and foot go downstream. It's too frightening to give up what we know or what we think we know and just go, oh, okay, I surrender. So.
But in many ways, the accountability practice was my first taste of that surrender, because when I'm willing to own the quote unpleasant end quote truth, I'm willing to own my arrogance, I'm willing to own my cruelty, I'm willing to own my need to control or manipulate. And it's like you said that at the very top of the podcast, that about the embezzler. It's like once he owned the truth, there was relief.
Yeah.
There was a sense of freedom. And isn't that what I want?
Yes. And there's I lost it. I lost it. Something about owning arrogance. Oh, if I don't own my arrogance, and it is a bulk of it, had the information's in the subconscious, arrogance will come out sideways on me. The last podcast we had is racist. If I don't own my racist will come out sideways on me. And owning it is the beginning of the end of it. And you can't stop something you don't even think you're doing, or you deny you're doing, or no, that's not me. So arrogant, entitled, mean. For me, mean was, I even added mean to the point of cruelty. as soon as I own that, I'm mean to the point of cruelty. And then the feeling that happened based on my love for my children or love for my ex-wife or love for my own life, I was able to move towards kindness. You can't, and willing to let go of all the things that happened to me that being mean to the point of cruelty were simply in alignment with my experience, my trauma. And that's the counterintuitive part of this, is that if I say I'm mean to the point of cruelty, it validates that part of me that's trying to look out for my best interest and thinks mean is the best way for me to survive and stay safe.
It's almost as if the pain of our trauma is actually a gift to us to indicate to us that letting go will work.
Yes.
Because if I let go and own my trauma, all kinds of other things follow from that. Not just owning my truth of this particular nasty element of myself, but there's all kinds of unintended consequences that accrue to my self-discovery and my capability to create the life I want.
Yeah. It's all about living in freedom and being spontaneous, genuine, authentic, fluid, dynamic, organic.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time again, John. I appreciate your time here, and I commit that we'll take a more in-depth look at the 4 constants as we go forward, as we continue to share our insights about the power of this accountability practice for us and the people that we work with. People find this helps them create that life that,
Yes.
that each individual was born to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Any last minute thoughts?
I had one when you were talking. It's about authentic expression. I actually found myself several years back thinking, damn, I like myself. It was like, my whole life was, every time I looked in the mirror, it was dumbass, or why'd you do that? Or what's wrong with you? Or how come you can't? And I just had this feeling of, I like who I've become. And I want that for anybody that's willing to listen, or, yeah, I want to live in that world.
I'd say amen.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, John. I look forward to continuing this conversation next week. Take care.
Me too, Marty. Yeah. Thank you, Marty.
You bet.